What's up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. I am Andrew, representing the Stars and Stripes, and we have Faisal holding down the crown for the UK, but in the Middle East. How is the hot weather out there in Dubai right now for you?
Good. It's getting warmer. It's definitely getting sweatier. I think we're just beginning the heat, so it's going to be an interesting few months, really. But excited to see how it pans out. But yeah, excited for this episode. It's going to be a jam-packed one, I think.
We got a lot of good stuff. We're talking a lot of predictions in this episode because not only are we looking back at the predictions that we made at the beginning of the Premier League season, seeing how those predictions actually look now that the season is finished. Then we're going to also make some new predictions for the Euros, which kick off in just 2 days at time of recording. So we're going to have some fun looking at some previous predictions and making some new ones. It's going to be a good time. So, Faze, you want to start by looking at the predictions that we made for the Premier League season? It's all done.
Yeah.
The bow is tied. City are champions yet again. Hate to see it, but that is what you predicted, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go through it in a second, but I said it from the very beginning. I knew Man City were going to be an unstoppable force, and they've proven that. They had a bit of a bump near the end of the season, near the middle of the season, really. I think that drop off from Arsenal, that really push from Arsenal, really pushed them to the point. And yeah, I knew all along. I mean, I could feel that you were like gunning for that Liverpool top spot. But yeah, unfortunately, it was City. But I'm looking forward to getting stuck into this one. Do you want to sort of break down how we're doing the scoring on this? Because it's an interesting one. It's the first time you mentioned it, I was like, okay, it's going to be interesting by doing it.
Yeah, so this is like legit, and I actually stole it from Spencer from #United. This is how he scores his predictions when he makes them for leagues and such things.
Nice.
So there's a ranking and scoring system that we have used, and we'll kind of talk through our predictions and what it looks like, and we'll attempt to add a score to them. So how this will break down is if you got the team placed appropriately. So let's say, like you did, you knew that City was going to finish top. You selected them to finish top. They did. So you get no points. That's great. You want a low score in this scoring type of thing, just like golf. So we're playing some golf here. Then let's say you put Chelsea in 10th, but they finished in 6. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're 4 spaces off where they actually finished. So you add that 4 points to your total. We'll do that for every team out of 20. Then once we get all those teams slated, we've added the points, we get a total point, and the lowest points will win. So this is fun for 2 reasons. One, we can kind of compare our points to see who had a better overall prediction. Then we'll be able to do this year over year and see if we've improved from last year or if we're getting worse and how that will look. So this should be pretty fun. You ready for this?
I'm ready. I'm excited. It's gonna be a good one.
So I think the way that we do this, kind of how we did the predictions, I'll start us off at the bottom of the table. So with 20. So I'll talk about who I had in the 20 spot and who actually finished in the 20 spot. And then I will tell you the points or no points that I do get for the prediction that I made. Then I'll flip it over to you. Then if you want to do 19 and 18, then flip it back to me. I'll do 17 and 16 and so on.
Sounds good.
So let's get this rolling. So in the bottom of the barrel, number 20. My prediction was Luton Town. It was a sad prediction. I would have wanted them to stay. They're a cool team, kind of like a smaller club, making it up into the fancy Premier League. And we all know the stories about their tiny little stadium that needed tons of upgrades because it's just like around some houses. Pretty cool. Now, they did not finish 20th. However, they did get relegated, sadly. If you follow Premier League, you'll know. So that means since they did not finish 20th, I'm going to be getting some points. And Sheffield United was in the actual 20 spot. So since I was incorrect, Luton actually finished in 18th. So almost escaping regulation. Not that. They almost escaped getting the boot down. So that means I get 2 points. So it's at 20 is where I had them, but they're up 2 spots. So 2 spots, my total is now 2 points. So do you want to look at your 20 spot?
Yeah, it's a very similar story here. I also had Luton in the 20th place. I think that was fairly warranted, just from the way they performed, particularly in the championship, but also how their squad was built. I just genuinely thought that would not necessarily just be relegated, but I thought they'd be rock bottom. But you could argue that being third from bottom isn't too bad. So still relegated, I'm sure. I'm afraid, but so I did exactly the same. Did them 20th. They obviously got 18th. So I am also 2 points. So it's neck and neck as we begin this. I think then it's bad times for me in the next one. So in 19th place, I had Bournemouth. And unfortunately, I say fortunately for me, but fortunately for Bournemouth, they did particularly well. They got into the 12th place there. So great. I mean, amazing performance. You can see that throughout the season, they were really kind of bringing into their own, especially if you play fantasy football, for example. You had to have a Bournemouth defender in at points. Like, it was essential. They were doing so well for that. So I had Bournemouth in 19th. They finished in 12th. So if my maths is correct, that is 7.
It is 7.
There we go. Making me question myself. But that is 7 points. So terrible start from me in that one. So 7 points myself.
So is that your highest score overall that you'll have inside of this lineup?
There's one more worse than this.
Okay. All right. Great. I like to hear that. That's good.
So you got a big smile on your face. So
we don't know each other's numbers yet. So this is us figuring it out for the first time and seeing. I think it might be pretty close. I have a pretty rough spot as we get into the middle of the table. So we'll find out. But now I'll talk about my number 19. So in the 19th spot, I had Sheffield United. I didn't have a ton of faith. I didn't like the moves that they made in the offseason. They just didn't have the right collaboration in terms of what their roster looks like. And I always talk about this every episode. You got to have at least one or two of those star strong players, and then you got to fill it with the right key position players. I don't think they did that. They just didn't have the right offseason for me. So that's why I put them in 19. Thankfully for me, they finished in 20th. So still relegated. So I picked the right team that did get relegated. So that's great. And they're only one spot away. So that means I only need to add 1 point to my tally. So I now find myself with 3 total points as we are working our way up this little shindig of a roster. Now, we already got year 19. So I will kick us up to number 18. So 18, the final relegation spot. Sad days for the team that is actually... Sorry. I was going to say sad days for the team that I actually selected, but it's not, because they escaped relegation by 1 spot. So happy days for them. And fairly happy days for me too, because that's Nottingham Forest, is who I selected in my 18th spot. They actually ended up being number 17. So not too bad for them, not too bad for me. Just another 1 point added to my tally. So that gives me 4 overall. The 18th spot, like in real life, ended up being Luton Town. So that is a bit sad because, like we had talked about, I would have loved to see them go up. We didn't think they would anyway with our predictions, but they got close. It came down to the last couple weeks of the season. So sad days for them, but happy days for Nottingham Forest. So who do you got?
It's the same story here. I also had in 18th place, I had Nottingham Forest, but they ended up in 17th, like you said. So for me, fortunate with that 1 point. And fortunate for them because they survived relegation. So, hey, everyone's a winner. Everyone's a winner, which is pretty good. So, just the 1 point for myself there. Next, and we have number 17th. So I thought that somehow, I just felt like maybe I was looking back at the previous episode and I felt like Sheffield United would be having a better season than they would. I said they would escape relegation, but I thought they'd put some solid performances together. I think I was looking back at previous Premier League seasons and I was kind of confident that perhaps the Blades would do something. Unfortunately not. And they actually finished in 20th there. So that is 3 points for myself, which... not bad, could be worse. Not great for Sheffield United. I really thought something was going to happen. I thought something was happening for Sheffield United in the Premier League. I was feeling confident with it. Unfortunately, that is not. So that is my 17th place there.
My 17 does not look particularly nice, but it does for the team that actually ended up where I slated them. They ended up getting quite a bit higher. So my 17 was Bournemouth. And I just didn't think they had enough firepower to get further up into maybe the middle of the table, even though that's essentially what happened with them. So since I had them at 17, they actually finished in 12th. So that means I was 5 spots away. So that is my biggest loss in my entire prediction. So 5 is my highest number. There might be another 5 tucked in there as we get closer, but yes, a 5 will be added to my tally. So that brings me to 9. We're not looking too great for just us in general. Like we're not prediction masters, that's for sure. All right, so I will then move us up to 16. Before we do that, the actual number 17th spot was Nottingham Forest. We talked about that. So then in 16, I had Burnley. I was thinking Burnley, they're coming up from the championship. They have some like momentum with them. They're trying to do some cool things with their roster. And I thought with Company as a manager, I thought he was going to be able to do enough to keep them above the relegation line. We learned that did not happen because Burnley actually finished in 19th. So that one did hurt quite a bit for me. That was a 3 spot. So Burnley not helping me out. Vincent Company also out. Not a great situation, maybe for Burnley or maybe for him. Now he's with Bayern Munich. We don't really know how that's going to go. That'll be something fun to watch for as well. But that brings me to 12 points total. So when we're talking 16 spot, where are you looking?
So 16th for me, I went for Fulham. So I thought, like I said, from the Championship, not necessarily having the greatest season. I thought they'd be able to kind of perhaps be in that relegation battle, but pull themselves up potentially. They did actually pull themselves up, but unfortunately they pulled themselves up better than I expected them to do. So I had them on 16th, Fulham. They actually ended up in 13th, which, it's not too bad. 3 points, unfortunately for me, which is not great. But it's one of those where I feel like later on in the league we'll see that I feel like I get a little bit more accurate as it goes along, which isn't too bad. So yeah, not too bad for myself at the moment. So we've got 6, 7, we're on about 15 points at the moment. So I need to you need to do something poorly, or I need to start hitting some zeros or some ones here. So
don't worry, it will get much poorer for me as we go on.
So my number 16 was Fulham. Then my number 15, before I pass you on to number 15 for yourself. I did not back my home team, really, my Wolverhampton team, Wolverhampton Wanderers. I had them at 15. I just felt, and I was listening back to some of my reasoning, and I still back my reasoning. And at the time, it was a management issue. They didn't really sign enough players that they kind of wanted to, and I felt like they would really trail off, and they would be in a massive, quite big relegation battle. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. They actually ended up getting 14th place. So I was kind of there, maybe 1 place in it, which isn't too bad. But yeah, I said Wolves 15 and they ended in 14. So just the 1 point there. So bit of breathing space for myself there. So not too bad.
So this is the only spot where I get 0 points because I predicted this one correctly, which makes me feel good. But then I know that I have no other correct predictions, so that's a little bit sad. So my number 15 was Everton. I knew that they weren't going to have that great of a season. It still feels like it was kind of a mess with their board and all of the stuff that they were having with the drama. We were talking about preseason. I don't know if that's getting any better or not. Hopefully this offseason they'll get some more things structured. I think they have a lot of decent pieces at Everton, so I think they could still be dangerous. I'm glad that they ended up staying where they are, and plus with the points deduction still able to stay in the Premier League, which not only is tough because you're losing points, but then all of the off-field drama and the things that go along with it. So impressive, honestly, to be where they are. And the only reason I got 0 points for this one is because of those points deductions. So not great for Everton, but ends up being great for me. So much appreciated, gentlemen, for doing all that sketchy stuff you did. Now, in 14, moving up one more spot, which I had Crystal Palace. Not super ideal. They're typically a mid-table team, as they fairly ended up being a mid-table team still, but I had them on the bottom portion of the middle of the table. They ended up finishing in 10th, so more toward the top of the middle of the table. So cheers to them. They had a better season than I thought they were going to, but quite a bit better, because that adds 4 points to my total. I don't love seeing that. So that sits me now on 16. And if my math is correct, I'm at 16, you're at 17. So that will mean that you still have a fixture in hand. So let's see how you ended up doing at 14.
So it's a good news for myself here. So Everton, I had actually on 14, and they finished actually on 15. So that's one for me, and that actually takes me to 18. So I'm feeling maybe it's swinging a little bit. And like you said, exactly what you said in terms of how Everton did to where they are. I genuinely thought that perhaps the point deduction would really rattle them, and they felt that perhaps relegation would perhaps on the cards. If you be honest, if you think about where Everton and Nottingham Forest have done with their point deduction, still playing Premier League, is crazy. Like, fair play to them. So really good work. So that's just a 1 point for me. So I'm currently on 18 points at the moment. So my next one was 13. And unfortunately for me, I put Crystal Palace in 13. So that is for them finishing in 10th. I mean, cracking into the season. I mean, Elise, Mateta, just crazy. And it's warranted in terms of the England squad. I think there's 4 Crystal Palace players in that squad. So fair play to Crystal Palace. Crazy end of the season. And I suppose if you gave them another month or so, they'd probably be maybe in the top half, I would argue. So great work from Crystal Palace. So I said 13, then in 10, so just a 3 for me. So not too shabby at all. What you got?
Yeah, Crystal Palace, like to see it. They have a lot of good pieces, a lot of young players that are playing quite well too. So I'm excited to see what they do next season. Maybe that will have to influence our predictions as we get closer to the next Premier League season. Now, this is where I kind of start to fall off quite a bit. My predictions kind of go in the bin. So Crystal Palace really starts it off for me. So thanks, guys, for that one. So my 13th was Brentford. So I didn't think that Brentford would do super well, but I didn't think that they would end up toward the bottom of the relegation page, which really kind of did end up happening. They were closer to relegation than they were even to where I slated them to be finished. So Brentford, I had 13th. They ended up finishing 16th. So not super stellar from the Bees. That gets me 3 points. So that brings me up to 19. So I'm at 19. You're at 21. And like I said, my score will be going up much quicker now than I predict yours will be doing so. So my next one, moving us up to 12. 12 was actually Bournemouth. That's who finished in the 12th spot for real. I had West Ham finishing in 12th. So I thought they were going to be like a pretty solid mid-table team. The season previous, they did fairly well. They had good results toward the end of the season, ended up finishing in a decent way. But my 12 was West Ham. They actually ended up doing better than I had predicted them, which I didn't think they could carry over from the previous season, the great form and what they were doing, especially after losing some key elements and key players that I thought they got rid of in the offseason. However, I was wrong. So with them finishing in 9th, that's 3 more points going into my bucket, which is not a great look and brings me past you while you still have a match in hand.
Okay, so this is going to be a very poor round in this particular section here. So we'll start with number 12. So I said Brentford. And they, in 12th place at Brentford, and they ended up on 16. So that's 4 points, which it's not too bad. But I just felt like, it's a fairly, you'd think they would have a much better season with the players they've got, Ivan Toney in that space, for example. So, and in the England squad again. So I will speaking a lot about England squad. I appreciate that, but we'll get into that later on. But yeah, Brentford in 12, but that's 4 points for myself. And then it really, really gets poor for me here. So for some reason, and I was listening back to it, and I seem to be like Vincent Kompany's biggest fan for some reason. I think I might have seen a match or a highlight, for example, and been like, oh wow, like this guy is going to win them crazy things. I mean, maybe he will at Bayern Munich. Who knows? Maybe I'll be right for Bayern Munich. But yes, so I had in 11th place Burnley there. So with them, this is it serves me right? Like I tried to be a little bit clever, a little bit wild cardy, and I thought maybe Burnley would do something. So this is now unfortunately my highest, and this is where I think I may lose just mainly because of this. So this is a whopping 8 points here from there, by the way, for this. So not great.
that does hurt quite a bit. So now you're at 33. I'm at 22.
Yeah.
With that being said, I'm still in the midst of my terribleness as we go through, kind of getting toward the top of the table. Really, the mid-table is just rough for me for some reason. So my 11th, and who actually finished in 11th, was Brighton. But my 11th, I had Wolves. So I know that was one of your squads, because that's kind of your neck of the woods. So I thought, okay, I liked some of the additions that they made in the offseason, and they had a great season previous to this season. So I thought that they would carry over some of that momentum and still have like a decent overall year, which wasn't too far off. So Wolves ended up finishing in 14. So really not the worst of seasons for them, even though they had a great previous season the last season. So I guess actually if you ask them, they probably underperformed their expectations. So I thought they would have finished 11th. So they did not. I get 3 points for myself on that one. So that brings me to 25. Now we're going top 10. We've made it. We've made it to some of the big boys, some of the teams that have fought hard this season and have made it into the top 10. So in 10 for me, it was actually Crystal Palace finishing in 10th in the actual season. So cheers to them. Not cheers to me, though. I had Fulham. I thought that Fulham were going to be decent. They have 2 Americans in their back line. I love that USA vibes. Plus, they had a decent season the season previous as well, and they kept some of those core pieces. So I really thought that they would still do well, maybe not as well as last season or kind of in the same range at least. Unfortunately, not so for them. Not the worst season overall. Like you think of Fulham as probably a mid-table team. They ended up finishing 13th. So with that being said, 3 more points for your boy. So how are we doing in the top 10 for you?
Yeah, of course. So we go into 10th place for me. So I actually didn't do too bad here. I said West Ham. I sort of supported that kind of solid core midfield that they've got. Jared Bowen obviously was doing particularly well for them. They had some solid players in the midfield, even in the centre-back field as well. So I kind of supported them, said they win me 10th. They actually ended up in 9th, which isn't too bad. So that's just the 1 point for me. So, we're kind of crawling a bit. We're trying to sort of do that. And I think this is where it perhaps goes a little bit wrong for me here again. I said, West Ham 10th. And then I didn't really back Villa. Now, Villa have had an outstanding season, right? And I don't think anybody really kind of saw it coming. Villa had in the 9th position, and we all know what happened to Villa. Cracking season, Champions League football, well done. I mean, amazing stuff. So Emery is really doing well with them. So yeah, they're in 4th. It's unfortunately 5 whole points, which not great. So
That's all right, because I did the exact same thing. So my number 9 was also Villa. So that is straight up 5 points into my bucket as well. 33 now? Gosh, I'm trying to do math here. It's just so high at this point. So that brings me, and now we're level on matches. 33 for myself, 39 for you. Unfortunately, the next 2 do not go well for me. And I know your upper echelon bracket is fairly solid. So I think you're going to be catching me quite soon. So I'll move us up to 8. I had Tottenham in number 8. I didn't think that they were going to have the best season because there was a lot of speculation as to what was happening with Harry Kane, with management at that point. So they knew coming into the season that there was just so many questions happening, and then getting rid of Harry Kane, and then Postecoglou coming in as a new manager. What was he going to look like? His style, still really new. So I think all of those questions for me were why I ended up putting Tottenham in number 8. But they did fairly decent overall, and even were at the top of the league for a little bit. So Tottenham, they ended up finishing in 5th spot, where I had them in 8. So that's 3 more points for your boy. So that brings me to 36.
Nice. It's getting heated. It's getting heating up. It's heating up. So my 8th place. Again, I was basing it off last season, and I was basing it off the manager as well. So that was, of course, Brighton. I had in 8th, and I think, from their perspective, they've obviously had a really poor season. They've obviously lost their manager now, who was touted to be the next big thing, and that was a bit of a shocker for me when they ended up losing their manager. But yeah, I had Brighton on 8th. They did, of course, end on the 11th, so not too bad. 3 points. It could be worse. So I'll take anything for me around the 3 or 2. I'm on board with. Anything more than that, this is for me a losing battle, I reckon. The next one I've got here, 7th place. I said Spurs here. And Spurs, of course, finished in 5th. So that is another 2 points to me. 44 at the moment. So not amazing, but we're still in that 40 bracket, and we're creeping a little bit. So we'll see what happens.
I'm going to get closer to you with this next prediction because my number 7 was Brighton. I thought they were going to have another decent season as they had the year before. Not the case, at least as the results showed this year. Just didn't have the same firepower. I know they had some injuries as well. De Zerbi did a decent job, but just didn't have the finishing portion that they would have wanted to with the season, just not able to put in that extra kick. So I, again, had Brighton at 7, but they finished 11th. So that gives me 4 points. So that one really hurts me. So that brings me much closer to you. So now even on matches, I'm at 40 points. You're at 44 points. So we're getting close. Thankfully, this next one I'm happy with. So I'll take us up to number 6. Chelsea actually finished in 6, but I had Newcastle finishing in 6th, which they finished in 7th. So that was just a singular point to me. So I am happy to take that one to the bank.
6. So very similar to yourself, actually. I had Newcastle in 6th. I said in the previous episode that I kind of mentioned how Champions League football and actually injuries, I think I predicted it correctly, to be fair. I said Champions League and also and injuries would harm them and stop them really from getting it potentially again next season. So I had them on 6th. They ended up on 7th, so 1 point there. Not too bad. I can deal with 45 there. So we're creeping, not too high. And then the next one, and this is this is an annoying one for me because I did not expect that. I did not expect really. I suppose it's poor from my perspective, right? But I had on 5th Arsenal. I said. That is egg on my face. I'll be honest. That is really poor for myself. I didn't really back, obviously, the Gunners there. And we all know where they ended, in 2nd place. So that is... so I said they were in 5th, and they ended up in 2nd. So that is 3 points. 48 at the moment. So we're creeping to the 50s. Not cool.
Yeah, that one does hurt quite a bit. And I also know that this one will hurt you quite a bit as well. So I'm on number 5 here. So my prediction was Manchester United, which I know you have not said yet. And as you and I know very well, they have finished lower than this. So I had them in my 5 spot. They finished in the 8 spot, luckily. It was a very rough season for them. We'll actually be talking about them a little bit after we finish our predictions here. And since they did end up finishing in 8th, I had them in 5. That's 3 points for me. So that will move me to 44 against your 48. Now, as we get to the top 4 here, I did not get any of the top 4 correct. And I know you got some of them correct. So I think this will be a photo finish. But for me, I had actually Chelsea in my 4 spot. I thought that they had a lot of good pieces. I knew that it would probably be a slow start for them, but I thought with Poch coming in that he would end up getting things sorted appropriately and that they would be a force to be reckoned with. They weren't really a force to be reckoned with per se, and they didn't finish in the top 4. They ended up having a decent season really just because of Cole Palmer. So I was not expecting Cole Palmer to swing out like that, coming out of nowhere for Manchester City and being such a core player for Chelsea, but he did, and he helped me not lose too many points on this one. So I do appreciate him at least for that. I'm curious to see what will happen with Chelsea this offseason and what they will look like next year. It'll be interesting, but since I had them in 4, they finished in 6, I get 2 points. So I am now at 46.
Okay, so this again is going to hurt a little bit. So we did, of course, went to fourth. Now the top four for me. So Chelsea, I had in fourth, and I felt like I could feel something was happening. I just felt confident about it, and their start to the season is actually, and I said this already as well. Like even if they had a couple of additional months, they probably would have been in this fourth position. They were flying at the end of the season, and Poch I think did a pretty good job near the end. So I had, of course, Chelsea on the fourth place. They ended up in sixth. So that's 2 points for me. Not great. And then I think the next one is ironically going to be my downfall of this whole competition here. And I'm this. I can feel it. I can just feel it. And this is how is it? This is just. Can we just appreciate how Man United of all the teams here that could ruin this for me have done this? My confidence in Manchester United has ruined this whole thing for me. So I said, of course, Manchester United in third place. I just stupidly felt confident. I was listening to what you were saying about how we sell the club and there was all these things around. I should have listened. Unfortunately, I overconfidently put Man United in third place. They did, of course, scrape, I would argue, eighth. So that's 5 whole points. And that leaves me on 55 in the moment.
Yeah, that one definitely hurts you for sure.
And I think, unfortunately, that's probably my downfall, but I'll let you end yours off. Yeah.
So yeah, again, I had Manchester United at fifth, like you had said. I just knew that there was so much unrest in the club, which gets me so frustrated because it's still happening almost a year later and nothing really has been sorted other than Ratcliffe coming in and slowly making some changes, which I get some of that needs to be slow. But a lot of stuff still happening that I'm not a fan of, and I won't have hope for Manchester United in the future until that gets sorted. Conversations for other days, because I'm now on to number 3. I had Arsenal in 3. I knew that they were going to still be a great force to reckon with this season. I just didn't think they were going to have the firepower to go up against City and Liverpool, and they ended up finishing in second, as we know, so that's just 1 point for me. So I kind of anticipated them being in that realm overall, which next year I feel like they will kind of still be in that same realm. So we will see if that is the case. So that brings me to 47, you at 55 after your United do you so well. So that will take us to number 2. My number 2, I had City because I backed Liverpool to win the top spot. We all know that. I was touting that the whole season. It looked pretty strong for a little bit there. Then they just faded at the end of the year with injuries and just didn't have the depth necessary to compete with Arsenal and specifically with City in that. So having City at 2 for me, they finished 1. So that's just 1 more point, thankfully. So nothing too dangerous there. Let's finish this off.
So, how many points have you finished yours? Have you done your...
I have the total, yes, but I'm at 48 right now, and you're at 55.
So, we all know what's happening here, unfortunately. So I said Liverpool in second place. They ended up on third place, which doesn't help, but it doesn't really do me. I mean, it's already our listeners already know, they know what the situation is. That gives me 1 point, so that puts me on 56. And then that 1 whole 0 that I managed to get has equated to absolutely nothing, and is also nothing in the grand scheme of things. We all knew it. I knew it from the beginning. Man City, again, just from their squad depth, but how they are as a team, Pep Guardiola, no one's going to stop Haaland, even if they try to, even if they were getting those 1-0, 2-0 scores, for example. Unfortunately, that puts me, my final total of this predictions at 56.
Yeah, that does hurt quite a bit just because my final, so at the top, we had Liverpool for me, so that gives me 2 points. And I was really hoping that Liverpool could make the run and kick City out. I still believe that Liverpool has the appropriate setup, club-wise and structure in general, for them to be able to compete the best against City. And we all know City have the money, the coaching staff, the resources, everything you would want, because they're backed essentially by a country in the Middle East. So that is like the bar now, which we should talk about in a little bit because there's some drama happening with them. But I think Liverpool have a structure that allows them to bring in the right types of players and have enough depth to compete. I will say Arsenal, they started showing that they have that similar type of setup too, that they can build and bring in enough depth and play it appropriately with Arteta at the helm to be able to compete too. So that did surprise me this season. I thought Arsenal would be good, but just not have the same level that they could do up against City and Liverpool, but they did. So cheers to them. But Liverpool end up just getting me 2 points because they were in third. So my total is a big old 5-0. So that makes me clear by 6 points. So the boy from America who calls it soccer, taking down the man from the UK. How do you feel? How do you feel taking second place in our first ever Nutmegged predictions?
Yeah, it's mixed feelings, really, if I'm honest with you, because I was confident about Manchester United and they've just let me down. And that also, that 8-pointer as well, has let me down. So it's given me a lot of food for thought. It's making me think my approach next time potentially is me a little bit more safe. I think I'm going to try to be a bit more, just be more conservative in terms of my predictions, thinking about it less so just on snap, like they had a great season, championship, they're going to be amazing, which I do with Vince Company, right? Which has cost me a massive 8 points in that one. And just maybe be more realistic about Manchester. I think we all really know where Manchester are heading now anyway. So there's going to be no more top fours for a few seasons anyway. So let's just try and just calm ourselves down a bit. But fair play to you, man. You did well. You've outpredicted and you did performance. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty solid. I don't love that I only got 1-0 out of all of it and being Everton. So it was kind of lucky just because they got points deductions to place them there. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, not a great showing overall. I've learned that really the whole middle section of the table for me, I had no idea what was happening. I was throwing a lot of 3s, 4s, and 5s in there. But then it seemed like for some reason, the bottom and the top of the table, I was better at predicting. I wonder if that will be a trend as we do this season over season to see if that really is the case. But I did think of something that I want to do next year for this. So I want to have a penalty for the loser. So what will happen is, if you're cool with this, I know that we both love the sport in general. So it's not necessarily, we just love one team. That is what it is. We love, obviously, with this podcast, to just follow the world of soccer and football. It's just so fun. So what I want the punishment to be, and we didn't agree to this before, so this was just our test year, but I want the loser to buy the winner a football kit of their choice. So the loser can purchase whatever football kit they want. They can make it a funny one. They can make it stupid. They can make it an awesome kit, maybe like a 1994 Manchester United kit. You can do whatever you want, but you got to send it to the winner. So next year, that will be the thing I'd want to do if you're cool with that.
I am down for that. I'll send you my address as well, so we can get that sorted for next season.
Perfect. That sounds good. I'll be ready to just throw that in the bin after I win again and start my own little dynasty here.
No, I love it. I think it's a really good idea. I think for sure. I've got a couple of clubs in mind. So
great.
We'll see. But yeah, definitely next season we'll come back stronger. Obviously, we have now we've got a break. We've just started. Obviously, we've got the Euros coming through as well. Before we get into that lovely kind of Euro kind of territory, obviously the Copa America as well, which we'll get into in a second as well. Some, I say breaking news, but some news that happened maybe a day ago about in the topic of Manchester United, and it being, of course, that Ten Hag stays. So that is the news. Ten Hag is going to stay. Manchester United, and the reports at the moment are about another 2-year extension to his current contract, which will be interesting. So it wasn't just a case of him just being like, "Yeah, cool, you'll stay." It's more like, we're going to give you more money and a new contract. So interesting from a results perspective and from a player's perspective. What are your early thoughts on that?
It doesn't really matter to me. Like I've talked about this before too. Changing out the manager at Manchester United will not matter because there is just such a mess overall with the club. So that means that there will be no change in anything, whether you have the same manager or you have a different manager. That is simply because of the disorganization within the club. They need to get the back room and front room sorted, have the right type of leadership in there so that you can end up creating a better structure so that your manager can succeed. Personally, I don't think Ten Hag should stay because if he is there, like what does that mean for the changing of Manchester United? Is it going to be better? I think if there was more structure, he could end up being a better manager. Hopefully that structure does come into play. I don't think we'll be there yet. With that being said, I don't know if he's the right manager to help usher in that new legacy with the new co-ownership situation that's happening, just because of the way that he manages his team. I do like that he's a bit more strict and direct with his management style. I'm a fan of that. And I think that is what is needed in crazy situations like this, what you see at Manchester United. However, his tactics are confusing to me. He plays more of like an American style where he wants to just do quick counterattacks all of the time. And there was some type of quote or something out there from him early on in the season saying he wants to make Manchester United the best or fastest counterattacking team in Europe, which is cool. And that's definitely a skill you want to have. Like, you need to be able to counterattack. However, I don't want that to be the main focus. And that is essentially his tactics in general. I am much more of the ilk of I would rather have possession. And I think Manchester United should be able to be a team that demands possession and controls the tempo of the game. They've done that in previous years and have been the top team for multiple years because they have played in that fashion. They just control the game. That's what I want to see Manchester United doing in the future as well. I don't think Ten Hag is the guy for that. Who knows what will happen? Again, all of this being said, I don't really care that much if he stays or not, because it's still a hot mess inside of the organization. Once that gets fixed, then I'll be happy to see some changes being made in the future. Who the heck knows?
A hot mess. I think you put it exactly correct there. I think it's, I don't think the manager changes things. My question myself, what I was thinking when this was announced was, am I happy? My initial thought is probably not. And that's just because, yes, we won the FA Cup, but for me, there's two real big issues here. And in number one, it's just, there's no, for me personally, when watching Manchester United games, there's no actual identity on that pitch. And I feel like, yes, you need to give manager time. I appreciate that. But I feel like the way we're playing, there's nothing I can see as little glimmers of like, cool, yeah, that's great. The real performances and the victories we really got have kind of from individual performances, right? Like, yeah, Garnacho, if you take Kobe Mainu away from this squad and his performances in Ten Hag's reign so far, I don't think, I think Ten Hag's probably gone. So I'd argue that certain players, rather than a playing team, have actually saved his United's career, I would argue, right? I also think that then the second thing, really, aside from the branding identity as well, is I think how he's dealt with some of these issues within the club internally. I appreciate some people thought, yeah, it was great, but for me, the Sancho issue really kind of underlines that this is a bit of it just feels like there's a bit of an awkwardness around the club. Nothing's really smooth. There isn't like a gloss on the club at the moment. And I think that kind of starts from the manager at the beginning as well. So I'm confident, and I say this, I mean, we can, again, it's as I'm saying it now and it's being recorded as well. I don't think personally Ten Hag lasts until December. And that is quite a strong claim for myself. But as much as, yes, that means stability for the club, I don't think it changed anything. I think the other clubs just going to get better. We've got Europa League football, but no one's going to be Europa League football. Everyone outside knows that maybe there's issues with Manchester. We're not going to get any good players. And I still don't think we're enough to get an identity, especially with the Euros in play as well. So I just don't think there's going to be any kind of gel. I don't think we're going to come back and be like, cool, yeah, we're flying again. There's question marks about Casemiro. Bruno Fernandes is staying, but there was question marks about him potentially as well. There's a whole Sancho back. There's a lot of question marks still for me. That means that it's not going to be smooth. We're not, we're not going to go, okay, brand new season. Let's start fresh and start getting results. So I would love to be proven wrong. I really would, but I just don't see it making any changes or making any difference really.
Same page. It's very unfortunate. And I am still at the point where I just don't care about Manchester United until they fix what the heck is going on in the front and back offices. So I'm just kind of parking it and just leaving it there. I'm going to leave the keys in it. So if someone wants to take it, that's fine. But that's pretty much where I'm living right now. When it comes to Euros, there's also another big tournament happening that I want to touch on first before we dive into some of our predictions and things with the Euros. The Copa America doesn't get as much hype as the Euros, and rightfully so, I guess, just because maybe the Euros have some of the better players in the world, probably so. And with that being said, I don't think they do the best job of marketing it as like an important tournament over here in the United States. So for those of you that are unaware, Copa America is essentially like the World Cup or the Euros, but for this hemisphere. I guess it's not technically a hemisphere because it's just like west and east, but it's North America and South America, and then the Central America portion in there. So all of the teams, the national teams in there, they compete and do different qualifiers throughout the year to qualify for this. And then Copa America comes together. There's 4 groups that are broken down into Group A, B, C, and D, and you'll have the best teams from the regions that have qualified out of those 2 continents, essentially competing with one another to try to take home the trophy. And America, USA, we are in it. We're in Group C. We go against Uruguay, Panama, and Bolivia, a group we should get out of, hopefully. If that doesn't happen, who knows what will happen with our manager, Berhalter. I don't think he should have returned anyway. That's a conversation for another day. But we also have some big players in this tournament as well, like Brazil. Colombia's in here. They just slapped the USA in a friendly, like 5-1. That was pretty disgusting to watch. Mexico, USA's big rivals, always in here. Argentina is playing as well. Canada, our rivals up north. Costa Rica, another usually good team around. So a lot of like heavy hitting World Cup teams that you see making some runs, also partaking in the Copa America as well. Do you have any thoughts on the Copa America? What is your perspective being over kind of in the European side of things?
Yeah, I think you said bang on with the marketing. I think we've heard about it briefly. I definitely heard about it in terms of lumped in with tournaments and football things that are happening this year. Obviously, we talked about it before the start earlier this year. Obviously, you've got the Olympics, you've got the Copa America, the Euros, like Paralympics, for example, the World Cup in the US, like the Cricket World Cup. So there's a lot of sport, and it felt like just kind of lumped in there. But as you rattled off the teams there, like the Brazil, the Argentina, like it's going to be a great tournament to see some of the best, like I would argue, like even some of Europe's best players will be in that tournament. So it's going to be a really good tournament to watch. If you think about Mexico in that space as well, then it's also good from a European perspective to see those teams and see how good they're getting, right? Because if you think about World Cup, future World Cups, you want to see what's the competition like, what are we up against, really. So it's going to be exciting for sure, and there's some great teams in there. Naturally, obviously, I feel like my affiliation to the US, we obviously want US to do well in that tournament. We want it to perform. So obviously, I'm going to be supporting the one and only US in this. But yeah, hopefully we'll see some great performances. I mean, what I tend to see is, and especially in the Copa America, is you tend to have players, younger players, that have come out and really kind of put on performances and been like, cool, this is my time, really. I'm on a world stage, really. Players excited, like, for example, Endrick, for example, Alphonso Davies, for example, as well. It's going to be great for Canada. So these players, I think, are going to come into their own a bit more and, potentially get a move potentially into other teams, especially in European leagues as well. So, excited for that one to sort of kick off as well and see some really good teams playing.
Yeah, it should be exciting. It'll be cool to see the level that comes out in this type of competition. When it comes to the USA, like these are the teams that we should be playing on a regular basis and being able to beat. And then we should be in that top echelon of conversation with the Brazils, the Argentinas. Like if we really want to become a true national team and start competing for stuff, like we need to get to their level, and we're just not there yet. But then being able to compete with like the Uruguays, Panamas, Colombias, Costa Ricas, Chile, like those types of teams are where we should be able to win those types of games. Because if you think about like Argentina or Brazil, you would assume that they are the favorites of this tournament. So they should be able to beat any other team fairly easily, or that you would always usually hear those two teams and you'd be like, yeah, they're probably going to win against whoever they come up with in the Copa America. We got to get the USA to that point, which we're just not yet. So maybe this is a good tournament to slowly push us in that direction to get a bit more competitive. Comes down to the soccer landscape in the US. It's just not as good as it is in other countries. We don't develop our players the right way. That's a conversation we've talked about a little bit previously. My dissatisfaction with the federation over here, a lot of issues that we can look into at some point, but this is going to be an exciting tournament and I'm very much so looking forward to it. However, let's talk about the Euros, which is marketed much better, and it will have some of the very big teams in this tournament, which will be exciting to watch. I already have found a calendar where it will automatically sync my calendar of all of the matches and the time. So I'm ready to just like binge watch some of those games happening. I'm very excited. But let's talk about a few of the predictions that we have for the Euros. So we'll like look at winners, who's going to win out of everyone, who's going to make it to second, talking about some top scorers, who is going to be top scorer for England, how England's going to do. So let's look at that. So let's have a conversation about that. How you feeling about the Euros?
Yeah, I'm excited, obviously, as an England fan. It's people are not a fan. I'm going to caveat this with people are not a fan of England fans, and I think that is a fair assumption. There's unfortunately a poor stereotype when it comes to England and England fans. If you haven't watched, by the way, Attack on Wembley on Netflix, it's extremely good, a very interesting watch. It's essentially about the Euro final, which England unfortunately lost, or fortunately for the security, England lost really. Where watch it in terms of, you've probably seen in the news where it was people trying to get into the stadium with no tickets, and it's very interesting watch. Definitely check that out. But of course, we've got some it's a great team is playing, great players and performances going to be happening obviously Euros. We've obviously got a lot of groups here. We obviously got Group A. We've got Germany, Hungary, Scotland, and Switzerland in that group, so that'll be an interesting one. Group B has Albania, Croatia, Italy, and Spain. Group C is the one where my eyes will be on particularly as well. Will be Denmark, England, Serbia, and Slovenia. So there's that. Group D is Austria, France, Netherlands, and Poland. Group E is Belgium, Romania, Slovakia, and Ukraine. And then we have Czech Republic, Georgia, Portugal, and Turkey in this lineup. So again, some really good mixed groups. The group stages obviously goes out to the round of 16, to the quarterfinals, the semi-final, and the final. So very excited. England are favourites, but if you see perhaps more the statistics potentially, if you understand how England play, and with unfortunately Southgate at the helm, I'm not confident in that happening at all, really, personally. I think we will do well, but we're not going to get into the final as perhaps our opportunity was in the previous Euro. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. But as we're going to mention, let's get into some sort of predictions for that as well. So I had a couple of things I wanted to run past you, get your thoughts on it, and sort of see what you think, right? So after I've rattled off a couple of teams, I've said obviously England are the favourites. Who do you potentially think are going to be winners in this tournament? What are your thoughts?
So there are a lot of teams that I actually think are coming into this tournament that have a chance to be in the final. I think Germany are actually set up quite well under Julian Nagelsmann, and they have some of their aging stars. This will probably be one of their last big tournaments, some of the rumors are saying, and they have some strong youth as well integrated. So I think they're actually in a good spot now as opposed to what they look like in the World Cup. The last one, which was 2 years ago now? Gosh, that happened so fast. Holy cow. I still have Hungary as my dark horse. I know I mentioned that. I think that they have a pretty decent squad that's built in a way that has key players in, and Szoboszlai as their number one, their star that can actually do something. I just don't think they have enough firepower probably to get all the way to the final. Italy will be an interesting one to watch, especially being in a group with Spain. That will be a fun matchup. We'll have to see coming up quite soon as well. I love Poland. Their roster is just not what it used to be. Poland used to be a force that would usually make it out of the group, and they've been able to make it into the Euro since 2008, and they just barely skirted in this time. So that was a little disappointing. So I don't think they're going to probably do too much in here. England, of course, they're going to be a force to watch. Netherlands, I'm interested to see because they're in a group with Poland and with France. France, of course, always dominant for some reason because their players and their roster are just quite stacked. And I think my last big mention is Portugal. Portugal looks quite scary. Their roster is built out quite nice with a good mix of young stars and then some older senior veterans who play a strong role as well. But if I'm going to make specific predictions, I'm going to say that France versus Portugal will be the final. And with that being said, I'm going to have France beating England in the semis to get there. And then I'm going to have Portugal beating Germany in the semis to get there. With that, my little extra dark horse is, like I said, Hungary. I'm going to say they're making it to the quarters. They definitely don't have enough to make it further than that. But yeah, I think that maybe if things go right, they can get into the quarters. So that's what I'm thinking. What are you feeling?
I think, again, very similar. I think I've got England in the quarterfinals. For me, I think I'm not massively confident, not just because of the Iceland game where I felt like we were out of all sorts, but if you're meant to be a team potentially, and Iceland aren't even in the Euros, so they're not necessarily playing for anything, but as a friendly, Southgate and the team and the England team really should be winning those games. And I saw players out there Yeah, maybe he's trying a few things, but I just feel like there's no Maguire, and maybe that's a good thing, a bad thing. But we have a Luke Shaw who's necessarily, he's been out for a large amount of the time. So, and for me, centre backs, John Stones is really, our defence really is going to be a problem for us. Our midfield, obviously, you got your Phil Foden, you got your Bellingham, and which I think personally, Phil Foden will be England's top goal scorer. I think Kane will have a mixed tournament. I just don't think it's really going to run for him this tournament. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm really love to be proven wrong, but I just don't think it's going to perform as well. And I'm very similar with you. I think I've got Portugal and France are in the final. And I would say France is definitely is coming on top again. And I think that's mainly because they have players that even when they're like a 1-0 down, they've just got players which are incredible that can bring out talent out of nowhere. Griezmann, for example, I mean, Mbappe, we all know these players and they're consistent and they're tournament players who are doing great for club and also for country. So there's always going to be performances all around that pitch, for example. So, that's what I've got. I would say you got your France winning, Portugal being losing finalist. I'm going to go for Phil Foden, top England scorer, and England, I reckon, goes to the quarters on this one. So, mixed bag.
When it comes to top goal scorer, I think it's going to be Mbappe. I think it's just going to be his tournament. He's going to play very well. He's going to score a lot of goals. And he is now free of his life from PSG. And he knows he's going to Real Madrid, which is where he ultimately wanted to be. So I think he's like in a good headspace to have a really strong tournament. And then on top of that, with other players seeing what the transfer can potentially mean for them in terms of other players coming to Real Madrid, now there's space in PSG. I really just think that he ultimately will have a good tournament in general. And then I'm curious to see like what that will influence for other players. But he'll be my top scorer. England's top goal scorer. I know you mentioned Foden, I think, right?
Yep.
And then I'm going to go with Kane. I do think Kane had such a stellar season at Bayern, even though he doesn't win a trophy and like breaks their streak. So it's the Kane curse. But I do believe he will have a strong tournament, carry that momentum of just scoring goals. So he will be England's top goal scorer for me, even though you hate him.
Hey, no England fan hates Harry Kane. Let's be clear on that. That would be insane. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be an interesting tournament. It all kicks off this Friday, time recording, Friday the 17th, with Germany against Scotland.
What Friday? Which is talking about? The 17th is Monday. It's the 14th.
3 days ahead. Already, my mind's already there. We're past it. I'm glad someone's got a calendar. So there's me talking. Yes, Friday the 14th is, of course, Germany versus Scotland, which you can imagine the atmosphere being crazy for that one. As we move on, we've done our predictions for the Premier League. We're nearing to wrap this episode up. It's been jam-packed with a lot of predictions on this one, so it will be a good one to look back onto and to get through. Obviously, you're going to come later on in the year to go back and do predictions for our new Premier League. So let's get on to close the episode with our Nutmegged of the week. You go for it, bud. Open up.
I got it. All right. So this one is pretty wild. So buckle in. So this has to do with Dinamo Bucharest. So I think it's Team Romania. And usually it's like one of the bigger teams. Like you'll see them in some like European competitions for the club overall. So like a fairly like common name that you'll probably hear occasionally just as a general soccer fan. But they signed a player. This happened in January. So they signed Edgar Ea. And he was a defender. He actually played for Barcelona for a little bit. I think he only got into one game, but was an official Barcelona player. So like decent. He's been around a few other leagues as well. So certainly like a player that they were excited to have signed and were stoked about the talent that he would bring in. However, a couple months in, they realized like he was just not playing well. Like he was just not up to par that he usually played like substantially. So much so that the club was like, what is happening? On top of that, he could only speak Portuguese, but said he was fluent in English, and he's played in multiple other leagues, so he knows other languages as well from his times in those leagues. And when they confronted him, they were like, yo, what is up? Like, show us your driver's license. Like, why is this being weird? But they asked for his driver's license because he has an identical twin. So they came to the realization that this might be this dude's identical twin, which the identical twin also plays soccer. He played in like a lower Portuguese league, like super low key. So like not a super great player, but like enough to show up and play some football. But like in front of him, he wouldn't show the driver's license. So that essentially means that this dude's twin, Edgar's twin, has been playing in his place for half a year now, which is insane and of course illegal. So now there are talks about the club being deducted points because they're using an unregistered player, which not the club's fault. So like this is just crazy because they got bamboozled just the same. But just a wild experience. Like, how does this even happen? Why would the player want it to happen? How does a club have that happen? Like, so many crazy things. This is certainly a big nutmeg for me.
That's actually insane. That's something that perhaps would be like a movie, and you think, surely not. But love that. I think that might be one of my favorite nutmegs. I'm just going to say that. Put that.
It's just so goofy. It's just so crazy. Like nothing's confirmed yet either. So I've heard like they're still trying to figure out the situation, but like how wild. You're right. It's definitely like a movie.
Mine is more going through to League One. It isn't as good as yours, 100%. Now the bar is set. But yeah, so obviously we know Mbappe is leaving the League One and going to Real Madrid. We all expected it, right? Now, the bit of an issue with the League One at the moment and League One is they have having some sponsorship issues, and they haven't actually, to this day still, right, haven't found a broadcaster for the League One games next season. What I've read, and it was a really funny tweet that I saw, was that Mbappe has left and turned the lights off as well, left and switch the lights off on his way out as he's done, which is really poor. But to top it all off as well, and for the teams that obviously got promoted into the Ligue 1, they obviously have not had their checks or their payment because there's no broadcasting rights, right? So they are struggling at the same time. So you can imagine you're excited, you got promoted to Ligue 1, and there is no money for you yet because the league is still scrambling around to find broadcasters, which is for a League One shows that the league is great, but the broadcasting just isn't there. The watchers aren't there, the viewers aren't there. So is that Mbappe? We'll see what happens. No more Messi, no Mbappe. What really does that league have is going to be the next question, really. So not great. Bit of a nutmeg for that one from me.
Yeah, definitely a nutmeg to not be able to run your business appropriately, to need to rely on future income to be able to make payments of your employees. That's a little bit wild and just disappointing because you would think that, especially a club like PSG, would have enough funding to be able to manage things just from a business standpoint. That's crazy. But yeah, a little bit sad for the league. I don't think that they market the league quite well, just like the Copa America is not marketed appropriately either, because there's some good soccer that's played in that league and it could be exciting, but hopefully that will change for them. And if anything, at least for the players' sake, so they can continue to get paid. How wild. Well, with that being said, fam, we are out. Thanks for joining us on this episode full of predictions. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Before then, jump on our Instagram account at Nutmegged Podcast to DM us with your listener questions or your take it or leave it submissions. Hopefully, you're able to get out on a pitch somewhere in the meantime, but be sure, just don't get nutmegged. Peace.
Peace, guys.